Hi everyone, it's me, Allie. Welcome back or welcome to my little bookish channel. It's been a while. I won't go like super in depth, but let's just say 2024 was a really hard year as a result of like constant sickness and trying to diagnose that sickness and then working 3 jobs. Everything kind of fell to the wayside. I feel like 2024 was just characterized by challenge as well as constantly feeling as though I'm behind in everything. So that's basically why I went MIA. But if you follow me on Instagram, I was trying to be active on stories. It's been a year. Okay, so hi. I am so excited, honestly, for this video. So we're talking about my favorite fiction books of 2024. I've done 10 favorites. I have cheated somewhat, which I'll talk about when we get to them. So these are the 10 books that I would consider now favorites. I've been really picky with my 5-star ratings. I think I only gave, well, I say only, but I'll explain. So I gave 50 books 5 stars. However, I reread an entire series that has around about 16 or 17 books in it. And that is the Guild Hunter series by Nalini Singh. And they're all 5 stars for me because I love Nalini Singh. So if you minus that, I didn't give that many 5 stars. My 5 stars are now only reserved for books that I consider favorites. So we're going to talk about those. These are ranked, but they are subject to change, okay? Anyway, it's my list, don't judge me. Let's start with, I'm going to call it not an honorable mention, but it's a favorite, but I finished it yesterday. So I don't know if I'm comfortable enough to put it in like the top 10 list because I literally just finished it yesterday, but I wanted to include it anyway because it is a new favorite and it is a 5-star read. So the first book, which I guess is technically number 11, is The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. As I said before, I finished this yesterday. So I'm filming this on January 1st, 2025. I finished it last night at 10:15. I loved this and I'm so happy that I picked it up as my last book of 2024. You know why? Okay, I'll explain to you why. I don't know when it was actually, but a few years ago, I picked up The Secret History by Donna Tartt for the first time in my entire life. And it kickstarted for me this love for literary fiction, for the weird literary fiction, as well as for classics. I'd been dipping my toe into classics prior to reading The Secret History, but when I read The Secret History, I realized that there are books within these genres that actually are freaking awesome. And it was a pivotal moment in my reading journey. It fundamentally changed me as a person, as a reader, and I love The Secret History for that. That's why it will always be one of my favorite books of all time. This, even though slightly different, it reminded me of the feeling that I felt when I first read The Secret History. It's this atmospheric, quite dark, unreliable narrators. It was just such a good time. So The Virgin Suicides, I won't speak on it much because I don't want to spoil anything, but it's about the Lisbon sisters. There are 5 of them, and this entire book is written from the perspective of a group of boys. They are a collective we, which I thought was really interesting. They're adults remembering back when they were adolescent teenagers when this event or incident happened with the Lisbon sisters. It's not a spoiler, they all decide to commit suicide. It was fascinating. It's like a microcosm of this community and the way that they react to what's happening with this family, as well as these boys just fixating on them. And the girls are, to a large extent, kind of these sexual objects of worship. There's a reverence to them, but the boys are adolescent boys and they're atrocious. Like, the things that they do to, get their fix is kind of insane. I think at the end there is an element of understanding that the boys themselves, perhaps the way that the Lisbon daughters were considered overall by the community was perhaps an element to why they decided to do what they did. But you are also privy to kind of like this outside perspective on this family that basically imprisons their daughters after the first suicide of, I think, the youngest daughter. And it's just like this snowball effect. The writing was absolutely beautiful. I just loved it. I just loved it so much. There's like this, I don't know if I would call it a motif, but there are these bugs I think they're called fish flies. I don't know what they are. And they talk about how when it's like the season for them, the fish flies come, and it's like this plague. The fish flies go on literally everything. There's like a layer of fish flies like on like the walls, on the windows, on the pavements, like just absolutely everywhere. And it's like this layer of silt, like this, like, not filth, but this like thing that's obstructing kind of reality and that hazy quality is the book. There is this haze to it. There is elements of romanticism because they're romanticizing these girls. It is just such a great book. It is absolutely fascinating, very slow though, because it's literally just a character study of a collective we character studying the Lisbon sisters. It's a very interesting thing. And I also thought it was interesting that we have a collective we, and they're not necessarily individualized in terms of the boys, but the Lisbon sisters are also forcibly mashed together as a collective. They are not necessarily individualized. They are considered, spoken of, thought of as a collective. What one does, they all do. We do get like individualized aspects. Like, we are told about each individual sister, but they're all still kind of pushed together. And I thought that was interesting as well. So this is technically my 11th favorite, but I literally finished it yesterday. So I love this author. And I'm really happy that I finally got to read this. This is Family Law by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is Acevedo's adult debut, and wow. I hope Acevedo only writes adult from now on, which I know is horrible to say, but I think her voice is just so perfect to capture these adult complexities of identity, of family, of motherhood, of sisterhood. I just think it was brilliant. So if you don't know what this book is about, it's about a family, but this family is not all that it seems. We have one of the mothers, so one of the matriarchs of the family. Her name is Flo. She's an older woman. She has adult daughter, I should say. She can predict when someone dies, and then one day she has a dream about her own death. And she decides, you know what, I'm gonna kind of do like a living wake. I'm gonna bring all my family together and like celebrate life. But she doesn't tell anyone that she saw her own death. She just does it. And then this is a catalyst to a whole, not drama, but just a reconsideration, a reevaluation of priorities, of relationships. It's also coming to grips with your past. I just loved the coming together of all these women. I loved the exploration of mother-daughter relationships and how sometimes they're not all sunshine and rainbows, but they have this thing that ties them all together, and that's their infinite love for each other. And it was fantastic. It was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. I would highly recommend it. only if you enjoy like these types of novels. Haven't stopped thinking about it since. And then the next two, so number 9 and 8, Foster and So Late in the Day by Claire Keegan. These are short stories, so I'm literally not going to talk about what they are about because I went in knowing literally absolutely nothing, not even the blurb. All I knew was that they were written by Claire Keegan. Now, I listened to both of these. So Late in the Day had me gasping. I was listening to the book and literally going, it was incredible. Like most of Claire Keegan, if not all of her books, it is an intense character study. You're studying this man and his personality, therefore his relationships, and it is very well done. Claire Keegan is one of, I think, the best writers of our, like, currently out and writing. She's incredible. Foster, holy moly. I'm not going to say anything about Foster other than I cried. I adored it. I think it was so incredibly impactful and meaningful. The way that Claire Keegan can do so much in so little is absolutely insane. Like, small things like these was amazing, but for me, Foster and So Late in the Day, they're like much higher in my rank of Claire Keegan. I actually have read all of Claire Keegan's books now because she's an incredible writer. So I had to have those on the list because I need more people to read those ones. They're amazing. They're so amazing. With Foster, I would honestly, don't read the blurb. Just see where the story takes you. I think that's like the best way to read Foster because I didn't really read the blurb. I just saw Foster, Claire Keegan. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna listen to that because I was on like a Claire Keegan journey and it was the best thing that I ever did. And the audiobooks were incredible. They're quite short because they are novellas. So that brings us to number 7. Now, I read this in December, so I'm like kind of cheating, but not really. It's my list. This is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang, or Rebecca F. Kuang. I have read everything, officially. I have now read everything that R.F. Kuang has written. R.F. Kuang is one of the best writers of our generation. She is absolutely incredible. I love everything that she writes. This was a wild journey. It was incredible. So I tandem read this. I read this physically as well as listening to it at the same time. It's like I like doing those types of immersion reads, and it was the best thing ever because the audiobook narrator, who I don't remember their name, but the audiobook narrator acted. Like, she didn't just read, she acted. You can hear like the tones, the derision in the main character's voice, the bitterness and the jealousy. Like, I highly recommend the audiobook. If you don't know what this is about, June is a writer, but her debut didn't really do well, but one of her friends, Athena, just kind of skyrocketed. Like, she became publishing's darling. She won awards, and June in the corner is like, my writing is on the same level, if not better, than Athena's, and she is just bitterness and jealousy in a woman, right? That's all she's made up of. But from her perspective, because she's a racist bitch, she's like, oh, Athena is only getting all these accolades because she's Asian. And she's like winning diversity points or something. And from the get-go, you as the reader know that June is a piece of shit. And what results is this story of June, this is not spoilers, of finding Athena's, after she passes away, which that scene, if you know, you know, what the fuck? I didn't see that coming. Like, I knew that Athena dies in a freak accident because it's literally on the blurb, but that was more than a freak accident. That was absolutely batshit insane. I was reading that, like, not breathing. And I had to reread it and re-listen to it because I didn't understand what I just read. It was insane. Anyway, so Athena passes away in a freak accident. And June was like, oh my God, she showed me her finished manuscript. What if I just take that manuscript? And so she takes it and then she edits it, writes into it, changes it, sends it to her agent, who's like, wow, this is incredible. But obviously it's a book that is exploring the lives of Asian people. I think it was Chinese soldiers or Chinese missionaries. No, pretty sure it was Chinese soldiers in World War II, possibly. World War I. June is white. So the publishers decide, because they're also fucked, their publishers decide to make June a bit more ambiguous, if you catch my drift. This is a cutting commentary and exploration of the publishing industry as a whole, but it's also one that I feel is a sort of like analysis on public reaction and public response and public sentiment to the publishing industry, but also to writers who are not white, to authors of color and their experiences. It was just really fascinating. And because you're from June's perspective, you're like, was Athena ever a good person? But that's not the question that's been asked. Like, that's not the point, you know? Whether or not Athena was good or not, it's the fact that June is completely just not well. It's a very wild ride. I couldn't stop reading it. It was incredible. It was really incredible. And I would definitely reread this again. It was, oh wow. It was so messy. And you read because you don't want the main narrator, you don't want June to succeed. Like, that's why you read. That's why you read it. It was such an interesting reading experience. We're up to our 6th book. I also read this in December. Doesn't matter. Wow. What can I say about this book? This is Pew by Catherine Lacey. Holy moly. For a slightly short book, this was intense. So essentially, you have our unnamed narrator who the community decides to call Pew because they're found sleeping on a church pew in their local church. So you have this community that is very religious. Their values and morals are centered on their faith, which is very interesting. And Pew comes in, literally, they just wanted to find a place to sleep. So they slept and then they woke up surrounded by people because there was a church service. And so they were like, okay. And then the family that was sitting on the same pew as Pew was sleeping decides to bring them in to their home and help them. But Pew doesn't speak. They're kind of selectively mute purely because they don't remember who they are. They have no recollection of who they are, of where they came from, what their story was. So people begin to ask questions and Pew just kind of is silent. And in their silence, things break down. It is such an incredible story. I think that this could be studied in so many different ways in terms of like how it can be interpreted and analyzed, because it can be related to so many current social issues. It's amazing. It is amazing. Pew, in being this racially ambiguous, silent, their gender is very ambiguous, and the fact that their gender is very ambiguous and that they themselves don't tell people how they identify because they don't know who they are, it just, again, breaks down the community. They are so obsessed with finding out Pew's gender, and Pew is just like in their own world and like I don't know. And I think, I don't know, I feel as though Pew can be also considered as this type of, I don't want to say Jesus character, but very sort of sacred. I don't know. It was really interesting. And the idea of like confession in this is also fascinating. Because of Pew's silence, the people that essentially babysit them, they just speak and confess to things, or just like talk about their feelings and just like unload, and Pew is just silently listening. And it was, I highly recommend this. I want to read like other people and listen to other people's interpretations of this novel. I think you can read this constantly, like you can reread this so many times and get different interpretations out of it. I think this is incredible, and I would love to read Catherine Lacey's other works. I think this is an author that I would like to explore their backlist in 2025, because this was absolutely fantastic, and I still think about it, and I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop the hypocrisy that Pew's existence brings out in this community is insane. And like the level of cultish elements to, like, it's just fantastic. Read it. Oh, we're in the top 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're in the top 5. Okay. You know it, babe. Bride by Allie Hazelwood. So I love Allie Hazelwood. Allie Hazelwood is my favorite contemporary romance writer right now. I feel as though no one really does it like her. She just gets what we want in a romance book. This is her first paranormal romance, and hopefully not her last, because this was amazing. So we have this world where vampires and werewolves, they just don't get on. And I loved that it reminded me of Underworld. If you've not watched Underworld with Kate Beckinsale, do it. Like Bisexual Awakening, okay? That movie was amazing. Those movies are amazing. So it's kind of that type of vibe. Werewolves and vampires are like nemesis. But there's this weird tradition that they have where a vampire is sent or like married off to the werewolves as part of like a historic peacekeeping alliance. And our main character, Misery, is chosen. There was a reason why she was chosen. I think because she's the only daughter of like one of the most powerful vampire councilmen. Her entire life is basically characterized by having to sacrifice herself for her people. So she's been sent to the werewolf territory. She meets in the alpha werewolf is Low. But that's like one plot point. But there is a major subplot that focuses on Misery's best friend, and her best friend is missing. And Low is, well, according to Misery, Low is a key, not suspect, but kind of. So she's like, yeah, I'll go into an alliance with Low. And she basically does that because she wants to find her best friend. I loved this book for a variety of reasons. I loved the way they portrayed friendship between women, but also just the developing relationship between Misery and Low I thought was beautiful. I thought the romance in this was beautiful. I thought Misery's characterization and how she builds relationships as well with these wares who all basically essentially hate her was really fantastic. It was just a fantastic novel. That's all there was to it. Like, it's a fantastic novel with a really interesting like plot line as well as really interesting characters. However, there is nodding. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it. But if you do, if that is like a big no-no, then don't pick up this book. But I loved it. I love vampire and werewolf books. I want them to come back, especially well-written ones. It just gives me so much joy, and reading this was just joyful. That's what it was. This is another one that I've cheated a little bit on. So number 4 is a book, but it's also representative of the entire series. And that is Archangel's Lineage by Nalini Singh. So if you don't know, Nalini Singh is one of my favorite authors of all time. Her Side Changeling series and her Guild Hunter series are just chef's kiss. They are literally perfection to me. I don't talk shit about these books because I won't hear it. Like I started reading these when I was a teenager, and the love I feel for these books and these characters. I could literally read just domestic fluff for the rest of my life. Like just no plot, just these characters doing their life, and I'd be a happy girl. be a happy girly. But Archangel's lineage is, I'm pretty sure, there are so many books in the series, pretty sure is the most recent Guild Hunter book in the series. And this, we come back to, it's like number 16 and number 17. We come back to Raphael and Elena, and things happen as they typically do. This was fantastic. It was so good. It was so good. I don't know how Nalini Singh keeps on bringing out bangers, considering that she's like, you know, 16, 17 books deep in this series, but she does. And it keeps on adding new and more interesting things, and she keeps like adding to the world and making the world building that much richer and that much more complex. And it's amazing. And I loved this. I loved this book, and I love this entire series. This is a series, however, that you cannot just pick up a book in like the middle of, you know, you have to start from the start. You have to start from the start, because you will miss out on so much. I'm not saying that the entire series is without faults. There are, but I love these characters. I love this world. I think it's so interesting. We have angels, archangels, and vampires, as well as humans. And in order to kind of control the vampires, we have guild hunters. Now, the way that this, I'm not going to talk much about the way that this society is structured, because we'll be here all day, but just like a really simple summary, there is a hierarchy. Archangels are at the top because there are only a few archangels, and the archangels are part of kind of a council, so to speak. They don't call it a council, but it is a council, and the world is split up into territories pertaining to each archangel. And then under archangels, you have angels. Majority of the time, you will have an archangel who's, for instance, Archangel of North America. But then underneath him, you'll have angels who are responsible within that territory of smaller territories. Sometimes you also have vampires who are, you know, thousands of years old, who have complete control of their urges, who are also taking like control of small territories, but they all are ruled by the archangel. In order to become a vampire, you have to actually apply for it, and there's like this entire process. Vampires are made by angels and archangels through a sort of venom, but like a toxin in their blood, in their bite. They have to release this toxin as like a purge, or else they will be, well, they'll turn insane essentially. So it's a corrupting type of toxin, but this toxin creates vampires. But you have to kind of pass a variety of tests in order to be approved to be a vampire. It's actually really complex and there's a lot of politics involved, and it's amazing. It's fantastic. And this book just added to it. And I'm so excited to see what Nalini Singh will do next, because how do you move on? And there was a huge time jump in this book as well, which I thought was really interesting and did not see coming. And I actually loved it. I loved it, which I wasn't expecting, that I loved the time jump, but I really did. Like, it brings so much more possibility to the story. So I'm really excited to see what happens next. This was amazing. Okay, so number 3. This was a really huge surprise to me. This is Carl Sagan's Contact, a novel. Wow. I don't know what else to say other than wow. I am not very articulate today. Apologies. So this is a story about kind of first contact with like an alien species, but it's so much more than that. I loved the way it was written. I thought this was beautifully written. I did not expect the quality of writing for some reason. I thought it would be very, very dense and very scientific, and that's all it would be, but it doesn't read like a nonfiction. It is dense and detailed, but it's fascinating and engaging and just so wonderful. So we basically follow our main character, and her name is, I'm sure her name's Allie. We meet Allie when she's really young. We see how she quickly becomes amazed, in love with all things space, and it's beautiful. And then we see her as an adult, kind of director of this laboratory space telescope that the entire purpose of it is to send out radio waves. I think I'm really butchering the summary of this book because I'm not the most scientific person. One day they get a signal and then all hell breaks loose. The politics involved in this book is fascinating because it feels real. Oh yeah, that would make sense that bureaucracy would make it go this slow. And who owns the right to initiate this contact, because technically you've used all these different telescopes to help build this, and it's really fascinating. The climax of this, I think it happened in the book. I think it did. And if you know, you know. It was amazing. It was fantastic. There's also interesting conversations and explorations pertaining to religion, because if there are other beings in our universe, what does that mean for the religions that claim that, we are the one and the only, creatures being created by the creator? So it was really interesting. And so you have these different sorts of people coming together and talking about religion, theology, and science. So much happens in this book, and you wouldn't think that it was so action-packed. It was amazing, and I really want to read Carl Sagan's other book, and I think this is a movie as well, possibly. And I also want to watch that. I loved this. I loved this so much, and I want everyone to read it. I just thought it was beautiful. It feels more like a literary sci-fi, but my jam. I loved it. If you have any recommendations of sci-fi books similar to this, please let me know, because this was such a joy to read. It was incredible. I was hooked. Oh my god, I love space. I love space. So number 2 on my list, I don't think it's a surprise if you've been here for a while. It's Rouge by Mona Awad. I love Mona Awad. I don't know what else to say. I've given all of her books 5 stars. I haven't read one book of hers. 13 Ways of Looking at a Fat Girl, haven't read that one. This, didn't know what I was expecting, but holy moly, it wasn't amazing. I'm pretty sure I have a reading vlog about this book, so I won't talk much about it, I should say, sorry. Rouge is, how do I describe this book? Is a very weird and wonderful book about vanity and beauty, the things that we do for beauty, the things that we sacrifice for beauty, and for youthfulness, and cults, and really creepy facials. And that's all I'm gonna say. If you want my very in-depth thoughts about this book, I will link the reading vlog. I just loved this so much. I think it's supposed to be influenced by Snow White. It's just an analysis on societal pressures of beauty and vanity and being young, and what that means, what we sacrifice for it. And it links to identity and memory, and again, what we sacrifice to be quote unquote beautiful. I loved it. I thought that, again, this is a book where analyses of this book would just be so fascinating, and the potential of studying a book like this by people way smarter than me would be so interesting to listen to. I think I would love to listen to academics talk about Mona Awad, especially Bunny. Oh my god. But this is, I think, similar to Bunny and All's Well. It's this gothic sort of fairy tale, maybe more so All's Well. So I'm not too sure if you loved Bunny, not too sure if you would necessarily love this, but I still think you'd have a good time. But if you loved All's Well and that type of vibe, then I think this is for you. I just love the way Mona Awad writes. I love the way she constructs her characters, especially her women characters. I feel as though they are very complex. Their flaws are out for the world to see. They're not hiding them. And I just I don't know, there's a type of honesty and like rawness to Mona Awad's writing, especially with her characters, that I really appreciate. So I loved this book. And I really can't wait to see what else Mona Awad writes next. We're up to number 1. And again, I'm kind of cheating because I've done an entire series for number 1. Number 1, my favorite books of 2024 was the Licanius trilogy by James Islington. I apologize if you can hear my dog snoring in the background. I read book 1, which was The Shadow of What Was Lost. The Shadow of What Was Lost, I believe, in a reading vlog, and I will also link that. It was amazing. I didn't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't what I got. And it was so much more. It was so much more than I anticipated. It was amazing. So this is very reminiscent of The Wheel of Time. You can really see that James Islington was influenced and inspired by Robert Jordan. I loved the way that this series played with the idea of time. Like, what is time? It literally loses meaning, but it's also a really fascinating consideration of free will. So it's basically like, do we have free will if everything is predestined? Everything that we do has already been done because that's what our Creator organized. So what is free will? Do we actually have it? And so you have that running through all these books. And it's not something that is necessarily solved. It's more just a question that runs through all of these books. And you also, oh my God, I don't even know how to describe, because you have to just read them. But you mainly follow the 4 characters. And these 4 characters are the main characters. At no point in this series do you feel as though one person is the main character. There is not one hero in this series. They are all, in their own ways, heroes, anti-heroes, bit of both. And you see their own journeys. It is a coming of age novel series in many ways. And it's also a story of redemption, especially for one character. If you know, you know. This is amazing. This series is incredible. And I know that James Islington is receiving a lot of love and hype for his most recent published novel, which I think is The Will of the Many. The Will of the Many. But people need to read the Licanius trilogy, because this is spectacular writing. It's spectacular fantasy. The world is so complex. I recommend writing notes, to be honest, because and don't read them like I did. I read them very far apart from each other, especially book 1 and book 2 I read far apart from each other. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend reading them quite close together so you don't forget, because one thing that is mentioned in book 1 becomes important in book 3. And it's just the way that James Islington brings these characters' stories that are kind of separate because they're going on their various journeys and then they come together. It's amazing. It's amazing. I couldn't predict anything that happened in this series. The ending was bittersweet, but it made sense. The ending of this entire trilogy, book 3, Light of All That Falls, the ending of this made sense, even though it was bittersweet. But I understood it, and it was just perfection. It was an almost perfect trilogy, and I can't recommend these enough. They're commitments, but wow. They play with time travel. The magic system is so unique. The politics of the world is also really interesting, and the way the politics and the magic, the dynamics between those two, the idea of power and corruption and the idea of good and evil, it's just really interesting. The only thing that I will say is at no point do we really get an understanding of why the main overarching big bad is doing what he's doing. Like, we get like, you know, he's doing it because he wants to be part of the world again, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, but why? For what purpose? And I would have liked that to be answered in much more detail. But other than that, like, can you fight your destiny when your destiny has already been written? Like, it's just so good. Anyway, that was my favorite books, fiction books of 2024. I really hope you enjoyed. I am going to be doing a non-fiction favorites because surprisingly, your girl read some non-fiction books in 2024. But thank you so much for being here with me and listening to me rant about the books that I loved. I am really hopeful for 2025. I really hope that I am able to stay on top of things. I wish we all have a much kinder and gentler 2025 than most of us had in 2024. I will see you next time. Bye, friends.